Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Xander Sprague.
Hello, Epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Xander Sprague, and today I am joined by Solomon Schmidt. Solomon, tell us a little about who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks for having me on, Xander. So I have written a series of books called History Bites, which I started when I was 12, and I was never into sports, really. I was not good at sports. I was kind of nerdy with how much I loved history, and my dad gave me an idea to write a book for kids my age that would help kids get excited about U.S. history. My mom was always giving me books from the time I was a little kid. And so I created this series called History Bites with chapters that are bite-sized. So 3 to 4 pages on George Washington, World War II, whatever the topic may be. I go through hundreds of people and events in U.S. and world history with pictures, fun facts, bobblehead, illustration of myself, review questions, things to make it fun and engaging for kids. And I also have a YouTube channel called History Bites, which ties in with the books, and I've done about 150 videos and interviews on the channel so far. And then most recently, and this prompted our meeting, as you know, Xander, I completed a biography on Alan Dershowitz, a very famous attorney. And I know it's a bit of a switch from History Bites to Alan Dershowitz, but there you are.
Well, we all... Trust me, we all have things where there's a bit of a shift, but where the passion goes. Now, I do have to say, I love the idea of History Bites. I was, aside from being a psychology major in undergrad, I was also a history major. And so I find history fascinating. I grew up in New England, so I grew up surrounded by all kinds of American history. And I think that there's so much fascinating stuff that's happened. And people just don't know about it.
That's right. And you talk about New England. I've recently been reading a biography on John Adams by David McCullough, who is one of our great historians, passed away now. And the story of our founding fathers and mothers is just sensationally interesting. And when it comes to Dershowitz, to my biography on him, I see him in some ways as a direct descendant of founding fathers like John Adams. You may remember John Adams was a lawyer and received all sorts of flack for taking on the case defending the British soldiers in the Boston Massacre trial who killed colonists. And John Adams was on the side of the colonists in the struggle between Britain and the American colonies. And people gave him pushback over representing the British soldiers in this trial. And he said, look, if we really believe in the concept of equal justice for all people, that applies to the British soldiers as much as to the colonists. And he knew it was going to cost him in reputation and in career opportunities. He believed it was the right thing and did it anyway. That's Dershowitz to a T.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is part of what makes, I think our country great is we really do have equal opportunity to be defended. And when you've been accused of something, you have just as much of a right to have someone defend you. And if you're, if the prosecution doesn't do their job, then you get found innocent. I know this personally because for about 15 years, my dad was a district court judge in Massachusetts. And we, many a dinner, we would talk about some of the cases that he had, seen, that he had adjudicated. And, there were some, I got to go see him in court, and there were some where, even though you're like, I'm sitting there going, there seems to be evidence that this person did what they're accused of, perhaps excessive speed or driving under the influence, none of which I'm advocating at all. But the prosecution simply, doesn't present a case that's good enough, and that person's, acquitted. And you may go, well, gee, I don't think that's right, but that is the way our system works.
That's right.
And so, one thing that was interesting, when I was in college, I went over to Australia to study Australian history. And so I studied settler history and Aboriginal history. Very fascinating, let me tell you. Learned a lot. What I learned about Aboriginal history is here's a people that's 60,000 years old. It's an oral history. And since I'm not Aboriginal, I can't actually really, I can't know it because I'm not Aboriginal. I can hear about it. And everything I read was actually a missionary writing down what one person told them. Now, what we know about what know about history also, I assume, Solomon, is we sometimes have to question, I think, what we read. We read and go, oh, that's the way it happened. But you and I could witness the same exact thing and have different takes about what happened. And so I learned a lot about like believe, but also question. Okay, is that the way it happened? The Boston Massacre you were talking about. We kind of have one account. Maybe there was the account from the English side that says, well, the colonists were hurling bricks at them, right? I don't know. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, that's interesting.
Yep, it is. And it's hard, Xander, when it comes to history and when you talk about facts, what is fact, what is truth? And one of the things that I was really lucky with with my book Legal Gladiator on Dershowitz was I had access to primary resources. I
Sure.
had Dershowitz, his friends, his family, his colleagues, clients. I interviewed a lot of prominent people in our nation: Justice Breyer, Stephen Breyer, President Trump, Mike Tyson, Woody Allen, Robert Kennedy Jr., so many people. And when you get access to primary resources, in addition to interviews, I also looked through Alan Dershowitz's personal archives in Brooklyn College, where he has hundreds of thousands of documents from his legal career and his career as a professor at Harvard Law School for 50 years. Legal memos, letters, diaries, newspaper clippings, photographs. It helps you build a more complete picture. It helps you be able to decide on some issues with reasonable certainty what we can trust is true or factual. And then where facts were disputed, I just tried to give both sides of an account. If, like, for example, one of Dershowitz's greatest intellectual opponents is Noam Chomsky, a prominent left-wing activist, retired professor from MIT. He and Dershowitz have had many vehement disagreements over the Israel-Palestine controversy. And in that situation, history is very much disputed. And so when it came to their debates, I quoted both of them, and I leave it to readers to figure out who they want to believe. And if readers want to go off and do their own investigation, that's great. And that's one of the things I enjoy about reading and about writing is hopefully you inspire people to start their own epic journey, as you might say.
Yeah. Well, and so I guess the question I have for you is one, how did you come up with the idea to write a biography about Alan Dershowitz? And then, very impressively, how did you get access to all these primary sources? Because I'm guessing most of the people that you named, it's impressive, but it's not like you necessarily just pick up the phone and go, hey, Mike Tyson, I'd like to talk to you, right? He's got people.
Yep. Well, with the first question, Xander, I I had written 8 books in my series History Bites by 2021, and I was looking for a change of pace.
Hmm.
I've written 2 kids biographies on J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, but I was always interested in the idea of doing a full-length biography on someone living and hopefully interviewing them.
Hmm.
And I came across the work of Professor Dershowitz, and particularly him as a constitutional scholar. And
Hmm.
I began researching his life a bit and realized that he's got a fascinating career, fascinating story. I mean, when you take his career, he's done around 300 legal cases, including, Mike Tyson's case in the 90s, O.J. Simpson, Jim Baker's case, the televangelist,
Hmm.
and other cases, Jeffrey Epstein, President Trump's impeachment trial. Some of these are just horrible stories, but fascinating from a legal standpoint. So you've got his legal career. Then you've got Dershowitz as a 50-year professor at Harvard Law School, the youngest in Harvard's history. He was tenured at 27 in 1967. He
Wow.
taught he taught 10,000 students. Ted Cruz, Elena Kagan, Natalie Portman, Jamie Raskin, and so many others. He's a best-selling author and speaker. He has sold 2 million books in a dozen languages. He's written 55 books. He has spoken in person to 2 million people. He's addressed the House of Lords, the Senate, the Knesset, the French Parliament. He's spoken in the Sydney Opera House, etc. And then you've also got his career as a Zionist, which is very controversial, I understand. But he has been one of the most prominent advocates for Israel on the world stage and is a close friend of Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders. So you've got that side of his story, but then he's also got an amazing human story. I mean, a couple questions that drove me on in my research. One was, how does a kid who is a punk, a kid who mothers in his community, mothers told their daughters in his neighborhood, don't don't associate with Avi Dershowitz. That was his nickname, Avi,
Yeah.
AVI. He's a boy with no future. That's what one mother said. Terrible grades in school, faked his own suicide in school, terribly behaved kid, loudmouth. How does that kid, just this punk, a kid who everyone expected to be a loser, end up 60 years later, whatever it was, 60 odd years later, standing on the floor of the Senate in a presidential impeachment trial, representing the President of the United States. And as he's standing on the floor of the Senate with the Chief Justice behind him and the leaders of our nation in front of him, some of the faces he's looking out at are senators who sat at his feet at Harvard Law School.
Yeah.
That was one question. And then another question that drove me on was, why does a man who until recently is a member of the Democratic Party and still and always has held basic democratic political beliefs, anti-death penalty, pro-choice, pro-reasonable gun control, and other positions, a New Deal Democrat, why does that guy defend President Trump, and most importantly, knowing he's going to be canceled for it? So that is what got me onto Dershowitz, and then I was introduced to him by a civil liberties lawyer in Boston named Harvey Silverglate, who was one of the first people I reached out to when I was first starting to research Dershowitz's life. Turns out Harvey has known Dershowitz for 60 years and is basically his only friend who's a Democrat who supported Dershowitz through his representation of President Trump. So I hit the jackpot because Alan trusted Harvey, and Harvey is a confidant of Alan.
Sure.
And so when Harvey went to Dershowitz and said, "Hey, there's this kid, right, who wants to write a biography on you, and he's hoping to get in touch with you," that meant something to Dershowitz. And I met him, told him what my proposal was for the biography, and he was enthusiastic about it. And he, of course, helped me over the last few years, get in touch with some of the prominent people I mentioned earlier. And
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I'm just so grateful to him giving a chance to an 18-year-old. It was it was a really special thing he did, and I'm just very grateful to him.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. One of the things that I like to talk about in my book, for me, I think we have epic things that we want to do. And clearly, you saw an epic journey you wanted to go on, which is to write this book about Alan Dershowitz. And certainly sounds like it was really epic. But so many people, they talk, oh, I'd like to write a book. I'd like to run a marathon. I'd like to do something. And they talk about it, but they don't actually do anything. And I'm all about, okay, why? Let's get going. But along the way, I think there are things that we want to do, but they take time. And so there's that whole the two words that I think are so powerful are not yet.
Mm.
Okay. So both you and I haven't written as many books as you, but we've both written multiple books. And people will say, oh, Solomon is your book out? So you have two answers. One, no. And that just sort of stops the conversation, kind of makes it sound like it will never happen. But you obviously say, not yet. It means it's in progress. So my question for you is, what are one or two of your not yets? What are things that you are like, I really want to do this, but you either haven't started it or it's just kind of a longer process to get to it?
Well, there is a project I'm working on which is fairly long, and I have begun it. I'm currently working on a biography of J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter
Yeah.
author.
Wow.
And that is called A Pen to Change the World. And not to shamelessly self-promote, but it is already up for purchase for pre-order and is hopefully going to be out next year. But that is, like you know, Xander, with writing books, it's just a long haul. And I understand. I'm in a unique position in my life right now. I still live at home. I have parents who can financially support me in my endeavors. So I understand that writing a book is not always practical for people. The good news is we have this wonderful thing called self-publishing, which I have taken advantage of many times. My entire History Bites series is self-published.
Right.
I have many friends now, older, younger, in between, who have book ideas, have punched them out, finished them, and can actually get a finished product, can hold their book in their hands. And it's so hard, as you know, to get published, but self-publishing is such a great route for folks to take nowadays, because for people like me, I wrote my first book when I was 12. I was able to get a physical copy of it. And when you go through, I don't work for them, but when you go through Kindle Direct Publishing, you can order 10, 50, 100,
Yeah.
whatever suits your budget or suits your fancy. And so I would encourage any folks who may be listening to explore that route if you're interested in writing a book, because it can be done. You can hold your book in your hands and you don't have to go through the red tape and the black hole of a publisher. Even people like J.K. Rowling, she got lucky and she knows that. She obviously she wrote the best-selling book series in history, but it took, I think, around 11 different publishers before an assistant to an assistant noticed it and accidentally one day and then took it to her publisher. And I mean, wow, that we want to, obviously we'd all like to be J.K. Rowling, but we don't want to have to go through the hassle, if we can avoid it, of being rejected. So that's
Absolutely, absolutely, and you're absolutely right that the our ability to self-publish is opened up. I mean, there are so many more books that are now available for people to read. There are absolutely, a thousand books that are great that have been published and people get to find and read, but they're not coming out of, I can't even, publishers that we all know, Houghton Mifflin or
Simon and
Schuster
Schuster.
or any of those. And yeah, I mean, there's two things to the whole self-publishing. one, you have control of your book. So it isn't like you wrote something and they're like, editors like, no, I don't like that, and they change it, and also you're like, no, you just changed what I intended. I wrote it that way because I wanted that way. Now, obviously, we write stuff, and hopefully, we have people who help us tighten it up and make it, sound better and stuff. But
Absolutely.
without losing the essence of what you're trying to say. And you're right. It is super cool to hold your own book in your hand, be able to show it to people and say, yes, here's my book.
Yep.
Funny thing about being a published author, Solomon, somehow we become better speakers.
Mm.
I mean, it's got nothing to do with my oratory skills, but because I'm a published author, you're a published author. If people ask us, oh, well, he's published 8 books or 12 books, it gives us some legitimacy, some authority, which is, I find sometimes funny, because it's like, doesn't make you a better speaker, but somehow you are.
You're expected to be, you mean?
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah, and by the way, my publisher might be upset with what I said earlier, so take that. I'm just kidding. My publisher is great, and yeah, and Xander, if I could comment on one thing you mentioned earlier too,
Yeah.
I only comment on it because I've thought about it a lot, and I feel very passionately about it. And Jesus tells us, don't take the speck out of your brother's eye when you have a log in your own eye. But um, so I'm careful giving out advice. But one thing I would say that when it comes to, I haven't done it yet. Well, at some point, we have to simply pick ourselves up and do it. I don't work for Nike, but it's the Nike slogan. Just do it. At some level, emotion aside, feelings be darned. Get it done. Grind, finish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, the whole not yet is more not that I haven't started. But the example I'd like to use is, if you're a freshman in college, people aren't coming up and going, do you have your degree yet? Because we understand that there's a process, right? You don't enter law school, and in the first week of law school, someone goes, so are you taking the bar? Right? No, we understand. And yet in the wider part of life, right, where we spend most of our time out in the world, people are so quick to say, no, I haven't done that, right? But they may be on the path. They are doing it. They are just doing it, just like you said. And that absolutely encouraging people to take that first step forward. Get on that journey. You don't know how long it's going to take sometimes. I ran marathons, okay? People said, oh, have you run your marathon? Not yet. That's because my marathon might be in January, and it's not January yet. It's not time for me to run my marathon. So no, I haven't run it yet because it hasn't happened.
Nope.
I'm on the way to it, but it's just not the time for me to do it. So
there's a phrase I love from Bill Belichick, the former coach of the New England Patriots, and I'm
world champion Patriots, but that's okay.
That's right. And I am from Buffalo, and I committed the great sin of rooting for the Patriots for many years. So and I say Belichick's name knowing there might be some boos from people listening right now. However, he does have a great quote. I love it. Many great quotes, but one of the quotes he gives is, he talked about the season leading up to the Super Bowl. And when you're tackling something as big as trying to win a Super Bowl, or whatever your task may be, you keep stringing them together. Keep stringing them together, meaning you focus on the game in front of you, not
Absolutely.
the game from yesterday, not the game tomorrow. Get today's mission done and then accomplish tomorrow. And you do that enough, and you succeed enough, and you end up at the Super Bowl. But if you don't string them together, obviously you don't. So I love that quote, the keep stringing them together, the do your job mentality.
Absolutely. And again, in writing a book, right? you sit down and you're like, I'm working on this chapter. I know I'm going to be writing these other chapters, but you got to write what's in front of you. That's what you're working on today, this week, this month, whatever. Absolutely. And on your epic journey, we understand the road that we're going down, but we got to deal with what's right in front of us. When I ran my marathons, I had to deal with mile 5, right? Because that's where I was. I can think about mile 20, mile 24, whatever, but I'm not there yet. I had the pleasure to run the Boston Marathon in 2014, and it was great. Now, one of the bad things I can say was having grown up in the suburbs of Boston and then lived in various places. From mile 5 on, I knew the whole entire course, and I had all kinds of nightmares about, making a wrong turn and having to run extra 6 miles and stuff like that. But even if, as I was running through Natick and I knew the hills in Wellesley were coming, I had to deal with the road in Natick, not in Wellesley. I can know that it's coming, but I'm not on those hills yet. So that's not what is in front of me. And you're right. Just like Bill Belichick said, the game this week, here's what we got to do. Yes, we have the eye on the prize. So I couldn't agree more. Solomon, I want to thank you so much. This has been so fascinating. What you've accomplished so far is incredible. Your book on J.K. Rowling sounds like it's going to be absolutely fascinating. I know I enjoyed her series of books, so I look forward to when that comes out. Just quickly, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, SolomonSchmidt.com. And thanks for what you said, Xander, and congratulations on your books and your very impressive website and podcast series you've created. I love the title Epic Journey. So thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Not a problem. And I want to thank everyone for listening. If you want more information or you want to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And as always, I want to remind everyone that epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book Epic Begins with One Step Forward at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Xander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Xander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.